I'm going to share with you a little bit about a project I did looking at the effectiveness of one-to-one laptops, or the one laptop per child program. And it was a process that I found interesting because I was doing a little bit of reading, and what I found was the one laptop per child program, which was started in 2005 at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Basically, they had an idea that laptops at that time cost about $1,000 in order to purchase one, but they realized that most people in developing countries, teachers, students, schools, they couldn't afford that. So their goal was to reduce that to $100. So I found one article published in 2016 written by Jane, who in his team, they wanted to do a literature review around the world to see how are schools and how are teachers and students faring with these programs. Are they making any kind of progress at all? And their results found that they were. But for me, I wanted to do something that was not based on keywords. So not using a meta-analysis looking for keywords to see if things were effective. I wanted to see the hard data and see what was possible. So I looked at 47 articles published in 2013 or later and came up with 6 questions to guide my research. I looked at how effective are these laptop programs for student learning? How effective are they for student progress? I looked at the social aspects of this issue as well as the economic ones. I looked at the environmental justice aspect of what happens when things need to be recycled and thrown away. And finally, I looked at whether or not democracy was an issue and could be developed. So student learning was in fact impacted very much so in these classrooms. Students who did not grow up with technology in Ethiopia are actually developing cognitive skills and the ability to use logic and reasoning in a way that they didn't necessarily know before. Student progress was definitely being made, as I found in Birmingham, Alabama, and in Michigan, that students improved in using 21st century research skills, that is, being able to do research on a computer, as well as improve their standardized test scores in reading and in math. So the social aspects are what happens to these communities. When people cannot necessarily afford a laptop, when all the schools can't afford laptops for all students, I was curious as to what happened. So I looked at Colombia, and I looked at Brazil, and I looked at India to see what they did. And in many cases, they developed these communities using their wireless networks that didn't exist before. So centers for learning were not just in libraries or at schools anymore. They could be anywhere where people with a mobile device were able to meet. And so economically, a lot of these people were able to access technology and information that they were not able to do before because of the newly implemented wireless networks and the availability of these devices. Now, I was curious, what happens to these devices in these schools 5-10 years from now when these devices need to be recycled or reused? They can't just throw them away because of all the toxic chemicals that are present in the batteries and in the motherboards and the circuit boards when they make these items. So I was looking at India, and what a lot of countries are doing is creating jobs to work in recycling these. But I also looked at democracy. So in other words, I found that for countries that have universities that charge a lot of money, in other words, that collect student fees, they're able to offer their students a better education because of the fees coming in. So all of these successful programs had these 5 traits in common. The students and the teachers were competent in the technology. IT support was available to fix any issues. It was integrated into the curriculum in a seamless way, and the electronic waste was managed after it needed to be recycled. It was taken off-site and processed. So teachers, I found that for teachers that were already comfortable, say if they were science teachers, for example, they could integrate this very easily into the curriculum. But if they were, say, teaching English or teaching younger students, for example, and didn't have laptops in the classroom before, it was more difficult. Students, most people think, are already comfortable because they grow up with mobile devices, but their ability to use the computer and conduct research was less than most people would expect. So these classes and having laptops in the school was definitely a way to improve that for students. But also IT support, that was the #1 complaint that I saw across the articles that I read, that schools did not have enough access to the support when they needed it. That if the teachers or the students couldn't figure it out on their own, there was no way for them to be able to resolve those issues in a timely manner to be able to teach their lessons for the day. So I also looked at e-waste management again of what our district's doing. And there really isn't a program here in the US, but in other countries, say looking at India, looking at Southeast Asia, in Vietnam, for example, they're developing new technology in order to be able to process the material and to reuse it, which is a way to create jobs and help alleviate poverty that exists in a lot of these regions in the world. So integration of this technology may be easier and lend itself, say, in your science class in physics if you're looking at simulations or models on the internet, for example, but it may be a little more difficult if you're used to reading out of a textbook, for example. So my recommendation is for schools and districts to work within their available budget to have ongoing support and training for all the teachers and staff that will be using these laptops with the students, and also to contract and make sure it is available to have enough support for a robust IT team that will be able to resolve any issues. So in conclusion, I would say that laptops in the classroom are improving student learning, but not necessarily in the ways we expect. And in 5 or 10 years, we'll be able to look back and do more research in a way that will tell us how effective they are in terms of standardized testing and whether or not students are really learning and gaining those 21st century skills that we really need. So as for my sources, I have those 47 articles that I read, which I will make available upon request. Thank you.